A little bit of breaking news. DC Films boss Walter Hamada has departed studio as Warner Discovery finalizes exit. Now, this is not a secret. It's been known that he was leaving ever since the Batgirl debacle, which they mentioned in this article. That's pretty much the reason he's quitting. I'm surprised that he had to quit, though I think they were going to eventually fire him. I think the idea was for them to keep him until they find somebody and then do a transition. But he was like, I'm out after Batgirl. And his concern wasn't that Batgirl was losing money or that the movie was going to flop and the studio would lose money promoting it and it was going to be a guaranteed bomb. No, his thoughts were for the crew and all of this stuff. People that had already gotten paid. Not a good businessman. At least lately. He used to be pretty good when he was at New Line, but as the DC guy in charge, at least lately, his decisions have been pretty bad. The one good thing I'll give him is Joker. I'm sure he had to approve that. And making Suicide Squad R-rated. Those were pretty bold decisions, in my opinion, because Joker is like nothing we've seen so far. And Suicide Squad being R-rated made that movie a lot of fun. But Batgirl, getting rid of Henry Cavill, and he was very adamant that he didn't want Henry Cavill back. That got revealed the other day. He didn't want Henry Cavill back as Superman. He wanted to do the Black Superman and in the mainline universe, right? In the main universe, the main continuity, we were going to have Supergirl take his place. And Batgirl take Batman's place and have a retired Michael Keaton hang around like Samuel Jackson does as Nick Fury. That sounds dumb. So that's done with. Now we've got Henry Cavill coming back. Man of Steel 2 in the early stages from what everyone has been saying. And maybe they can get somebody in here to give us good DC movies, which would be a first because a lot of them are really bad. So we'll see. We'll see. The fact that Henry Cavill's coming back, I think, is good. Get somebody on there that actually knows Superman this time. Don't bring in a Zack Snyder. I'm not a fan of the Snyderverse. Might be controversial, I guess, but I just don't care. I'm not a fan of the work that he did. I don't think he was very good with those characters. But that's just my opinion. Now, I do like his casting for the most part. I thought Ben Affleck was a good Batman, and I think Henry Cavill is a great Superman. I'd like to see somebody that knows those characters actually make movies for them in the mainline universe. Well, we'll see what happens, but he is gone. Now, Black Adam, which is also his baby, is about to open tomorrow, actually. Thursday previews. Black Adam releases. Now they're saying about $135 million worldwide opening. I think that would be pretty good. This movie, I'm curious to see how well it does because the box office hasn't had a comic book movie in a while. It needs something like this to prop it back up. Box office has been bad for weeks. However, the problem that this movie is facing is the fact that the critics hate it. Now, to be fair, critics' opinions never affect the box office very much. So them giving this a 52% rotten won't hurt or help the movie because people just don't listen to critics anymore. But I do find it funny that they're hitting this movie as hard as they are. And the reason that I find it funny is because when you look at the recent Marvel outings, and none of this Marvel shit is impressive to me. I'm just grabbing the most recent stuff I can think of. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, they made it fresh, 74%. I think that movie's awful. Thor, Love and Thunder, 64%. I think this movie is pretty awful. She-Hulk Attorney at Law, 67%, or 87%, I'm sorry. Some of the best television ever created. 87%. Black Widow, awful movie. Some of the worst fight scenes, especially that scene at the end where her sister is on top of that explosion and she's like, this is fun. And it explodes and just knocks her back and she gets no burns whatsoever. Awful movie, 79%. Shang-Chi, 91%. One of the best movies ever made, apparently. Eternals, 47%. This is the only Marvel thing of recent that I can think of that they've given a low score. My guess, Marvel has put out too much content and they decided to skip the gift bags for this movie. That's my guess. So Black Adam, they're nailing this movie and saying that it's a mess. Now, I don't know. The trailers look good to me. I'm going to check it out tomorrow. I'm going to try to go tomorrow and see it. I have some things lined up where I'm going to be able to take some time and go see this. We'll see. Now, I don't go into a comic book movie expecting the world. I have, low expectations for this movie. So, that's where I'm sitting on it. I'm sitting on low expectations for this movie. As long as it's got some great action and the plot isn't ridiculous, I will be happy. But I'm shocked. If this was a Marvel movie, because keep in mind, Marvel puts out a lot of content, but when they didn't put out a lot of content, they would give it a higher score. I'm guessing Warner is just too low on money for gift bags to give critics or something. That must be what it is. I'm not sure, because usually a movie like this they would call the greatest thing since the last DC thing. But critics are, I think, overly hard on DC comic book movies. One of the complaints is the Justice Society being introduced. And I don't know how I feel about that because they've never introduced the Justice Society in DC Universe for the films. But, what I want to see is cool action. If I get cool scenes of him fighting the Justice Society, that would be awesome. That would be pretty awesome. But look at all of these rotten scores. Let's take a look at some of them. There's not really much to stew on with Black Adam once you've left the theater, except to be somewhat amazed at how the story comments but doesn't comment on the actual political situation in the Middle East. So this guy's mad that the movie didn't get political. This is a top critic from AV Club. This is why the movie's being review bombed by critics, because it doesn't get political in the Middle East. Here's one a little bit more and less insane, which is crazy because it's from Inverse. Ultimately, the needs of the DC universe butt up against the overwhelming star power of Dwayne Johnson, and the film ends up losing many of the entertaining qualities it might have had. Okay, that one's not as unhinged. This one should be stricken from the record because this guy's actually downvoting the movie because it doesn't get political in the Middle East, with Middle East politics, which is funny because I'd like to remind you that the nation that Black Adam is from in the movie is fictional and doesn't exist in the real world. But we should bring in real world politics to the movie. And that is the mindset of a woke critic. Let's read another one here. Here's one. The idea of introducing new heroes with powers first, origin later seems appealing on paper, but knowing nothing about the Justice Society and its members doesn't make them particularly interesting adversaries for our anti-hero protagonists. Now, I think that that's an okay criticism. I do think the idea of powers first, origin later is cool, but we'll see. I'll judge it for myself when I see it, but this is an okay criticism in my opinion. This one up here about politics in the Middle East, unhinged, weird, and kind of crazy. Let's go out on a good note. I'm going to read this last one from the movie Couple, which sounds like a fun movie. The first act was exposition heavy, and the pacing felt a bit rough, but the action kicks in once Black Adam arrives, and it doesn't stop. Pierce Brosnan's Dr. Fate and Albus Hoge's Hawkman are phenomenal in this. Now that I like. Big fan of Dr. Fate. Like Dr. Fate quite a bit. I think he's pretty cool. And nonstop action. That's right up my alley. So, we'll see. I don't put any stock in what critics say about a movie. I care more about audience score, but unfortunately, we're not going to have an audience score until, I think, late tomorrow or Friday. I'm curious to what audiences think about this movie, because that's ultimately what's going to carry it. I do think it's funny that the movie's being review bombed by critics because it doesn't get political with Middle Eastern politics. That's unhinged, weird, crazy, and shouldn't be a part of a review, because nobody outside of LA gives a shit. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think. Also, if you would, please like, subscribe, share the video, check out my Rumble, check out my locals, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace. Make sure to check out my locals. There's a link in the description. It's a fun community that I'm trying to build over here. If you don't want to support me on YouTube, you can come over here. None of that money goes to YouTube. You also can just come over here for free. But if you are a supporter over here, I do plan on doing an extra live stream once a month and throwing links to the supporters so you can actually come on and have a supporter live stream with me. Also, it's a good place to catch all of my content. You don't have to worry about notifications like YouTube. They'll definitely work over here. So come check out my locals.